In 2006, the Chicago Blackhawks were the worst franchise in hockey. They only had 3 Stanley Cups to their name, the least of any original 6 team, and their last one had come 45 years prior. They hadn't won a playoff round in a decade, and this season they finished 3rd last in the entire league. This was rock bottom. Their 3rd overall pick from 2004 was a bust. Their 7th overall pick from 2005 was a bust. There was no light at the end of the tunnel for Chicago. And somehow, just 10 years later, they had become the only modern-day dynasty. When I said there was no light at the end of the tunnel for Chicago, I was being a little bit harsh. Sure, their first-rounders from the past couple of years wouldn't work out, but they were slowly building a championship-caliber squad with consistent drafting. In 2002, they picked a defenseman by the name of Duncan Keith, 54th overall. In 2003, they picked defenseman Brent Seabrook, 14th overall, and later in the draft nabbed goaltender Corey Crawford and, at the time, forward Dustin Byfuglien. The next year, they picked up Dave Bolland and Brian Bickle. 2005 saw the addition of Nicholas Charleston, but it was 2006 when a major breakthrough came.
Jonathan Toews.
Toews would not play in the 2007 season, so the Hawks ended up as bottom dwellers again. This time, they got even luckier in the draft lottery.
This historic pick, first time ever the Chicago Blackhawks have had the first pick, and we proudly select from the London Knights, the Ontario Hockey League, Patrick Kane.
The Hawks surged in 2008. They improved from 71 to 88 points, only missing out on the playoffs by a pair of wins. It was their 2 19-year-old rookies at the helm. Toews scored 24 goals and 54 points, finishing 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting. Meanwhile, Kane scored 21 goals and 72 points and won the Calder Trophy as the league's top newcomer. That defenseman from the 2002 draft was also amazing. Duncan Keith finished 11th in voting for league's best defenseman. To rewind to 2005, the Hawks had made a seemingly insignificant trade, flipping Matt Ellison and a 3rd rounder to Philadelphia for a winger by the name of Patrick Sharp. And that low-risk move was looking genius already, with Sharp sniping 36 goals in 08. And next year only got better. Before the 2008 season, the Blackhawks Cup odds were plus 8,000. In 2009, they were plus 3,000. And the Hawks were about to make that number look low. The Blackhawks jumped to 3rd in the Western Conference and 6th in the league with 104 points. It was their first time in the playoffs since 2002, and they made sure to make it count. They beat Calgary in 6 games in the first round. Next up, they took on Vancouver. They were down 2-1 in the series, but stormed back, winning 3 straight and advancing to the Western Conference Finals, with Kane scoring a hat-trick and Toews adding 2 goals of his own in the clinching Game 6. In the conference finals, they ran into a brick wall. The Detroit Red Wings were fresh off a Stanley Cup victory and were the most feared franchise in the NHL. Despite a thrilling OT winner from Sharp in Game 3, Hawks fell in 5 games. A gentleman's sweep. Darren Helm scored in overtime of the deciding game to knock Chicago out. It was a tough loss, but it came just 2 years into Kane and Toews' very young career. The future was exceptionally bright. In 2009, Chicago's leading scorer was Martin Havlat. On July 1st, they lost him to his 6-year deal with the Minnesota Wild. However, Chicago were the real winners of free agency. Marian Hossa was coming off an amazing season where he had 71 points in 74 games. In 2008, he was on the Penguins team, which lost to Detroit in the finals. In 2009, he joined the Red Wings, eliminated Chicago, and eventually lost to none other than his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, in the final. Ouch. In free agency, Chicago threw the bank at him. 12 years, $63.3 million. They also added goaltender Antti Niemi. They then decided to try and run it back. And it went beautifully. The Hawks exploded for 112 points. This was good for 2nd in the West and 3rd overall. Kane scored 30 goals and 88 points and finished 7th in MVP voting as a 21-year-old. Duncan Keith won the Norris Trophy as the league's top defenseman. Toews had 68 points. Sharp had 66. Hossa had 51 points in just 57 games. The slogan, "One goal," spread around Chicago. It was the Stanley Cup or bust for them. They met with Nashville in the first round. The series was tied 2-2 heading into Game 5 in Chicago. Hopes were high and things looked good as the Hawks went up 3-1, but then disaster struck. Nashville scored 3 straight goals to take the lead, and a 5-minute major to Hossa with 1 minute left meant Chicago wouldn't even get to pull their goalie. This was a young team after all, and one fluke run to the conference finals isn't enough experience to win. Maybe the pressure really was just too much for Chicago, and it had finally caught up to them.
High to be taken to the outside by Sharp. Net empty, extra attacker, shot by Dayfree. Score! Kane! All in back, Sopel and drive, skipped in front, score!
The Hawks rode this remarkable victory into round 2 and once again matched up with Vancouver. They won in 6 games with Taves and Kane scoring a combined 20 points in the series. In a return trip to the conference finals, they took on the only Western team with more points than them, the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks were coming off a gentleman's sweep against the Red Wings and feeling great. They had a stacked roster with the likes of Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Joe Pavelski, Dan Boyle, Danny Healy, Logan Couture, Evgeny Nabokov, Marc-Edouard Vlasic, and many more. Yeah, it really didn't matter. It was a 4-game sweep for Chicago. Every game was tight, but Dustin Byfuglien's Game 3 overtime winner crushed any chance San Jose had. Chicago was off to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1992. In the finals, the Hawks faced Philadelphia. The Flyers were the last team into the playoffs, but had made a miracle run through the Eastern Conference. They took down the Devils, Bruins, and Canadiens on their way to hockey's ultimate showdown. Thomas Toporky scored the winner in Game 1 as Chicago won a 6-5 thriller. Game 2 was another narrow Chicago win, and they took a 2-0 series lead heading to Philly. The Flyers punched back, winning Game 3 in overtime thanks to a Claude Giroux winner. Philly tied the series with a 5-3 win, and we were going back to the United Center. Byfuglien scored twice in a crucial Game 5, setting Chicago up with a chance to win the Cup in Game 6. And it was a nail-biter. Chicago went up 1-0, then the Flyers went up 2-1. Chicago took a 3-2 lead, which headed to the waning moments of the game, but with just 4 minutes left in the third, Scott Hartnell scored to keep the Flyers alive. We were going to overtime. And just 4:06 into overtime, Patrick Kane got the puck.
Kane, watched by Kimmo Timonen, to the net! It's over! Patrick Kane has scored the goal! The Chicago Blackhawks' long drought is over!
Kane scored a goal which broke the Blackhawks' 49-year curse, and nobody knew it was in except for him. Some call it anticlimactic. I call it the start of a dynasty. In 2011, the defending champions had a subpar regular season. They had just 97 points and were the last team in the playoffs in the West. This meant they would have to face off against the President's Trophy winning Vancouver Canucks. The Blackhawks had beaten the Canucks 2 straight years in the playoffs, and Vancouver was hungry to get revenge. They went up 3-0 in the series, and the Blackhawks were on the brink of elimination. Then, they showed why they were the defending champs. They won 3 straight, including a Game 6 overtime finish and forced Game 7. The Hawks were a dragon in the West, the best team in hockey. Going into Game 7, the narrative had flipped. Now it felt like Vancouver was on the brink. But we all know what happened next.
And Hughes dumped the puck back in. Campoli trying to clear it. Ball shoots, scores! They've slayed the dragon!
Nobody would fault Chicago for losing to Vancouver in 2011. It was a 1-year disruption in their future dynasty. Or at least they thought. The Hawks had 101 points in 2012 and got a favorable first-round matchup against the lower seed Phoenix Coyotes. They lost. 4 games went to overtime with the future Utah Mammoth taking 3 of them. Mike Smith, the Yost goaltender, had an insane .950 save percentage, topping off the upset with a 39 save shutout in the clinching game. The Coyotes went to the conference finals, losing to the eventual champion Los Angeles Kings. This was a disappointing loss for Chicago, and the promise of championships, plural, looked in jeopardy. 2013 would be make or break. The 2013 season would not be a full one. A lockout cut the campaign from 82 games to 48, and in those 48 games, Chicago thrived. The Blackhawks only lost 7 times in regulation, ending the season at the top of the league with 77 points. Taves scored 48 points, was 4th in MVP voting, and won the Selkie as the league's top two-way forward. Patrick Kane had 55 points and was 6th in MVP voting. The Hawks had seen the arrivals of Brandon Saad and Andrew Shaw to their lineup. Both were instantly impactful. Despite the overwhelming success, their road to glory would be difficult. In round 1, the Hawks took on the Wild, the lowest seed, and made handiwork of them, winning in 5 games. Round 2 would be a lot harder. The Blackhawks took on their big brother, the Detroit Red Wings, the same team that had cost them a trip to the finals 4 years prior. It was not quite the dominant Red Wings team from 2009, but they still had many of their core guys: Datsuk, Zetterberg, Kronwall. You get the idea. The Hawks would win Game 1 4-1, but then the Red Wings took over. They won 3 straight games and went up 3-1 in this series. The Hawks would need a miracle to come back. Chicago won Game 5 on home ice, setting up a potential closer game for Detroit in Detroit. The Wings went into the third period up 2-1, but Chicago would score 3 straight goals, with Michael Frolik's penalty shot goal standing as the game winner. We would need a Game 7. It was a back-and-forth game. The Hawks went up 1-0 on a beautiful passing play. Then the Red Wings equalized. This was not going to be an easy win. Then, finally, Jarmelson scored in the dying seconds, giving Chicago a stunning win. Or so they thought. The ref had called a penalty on each team, and the Blackhawks were robbed of a win for all of 30 minutes.
Right back ahead comes Seabrook with a shot. He scores!
Brent Seabrook would score in overtime, and this one would count. Chicago had done what they couldn't do in 2009, beat Detroit, and they were off to the conference finals. Another challenge met them in the semis. The Kings were the defending champions and had just come off a 7-game series of their own against San Jose. The Kings were stacked. Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Jonathan Quick, Jeff Carter, Mr. Game 7, Justin Williams, and many other great names. Chicago came from behind in Game 1 to win 2-1. In Game 2, they scored 4 unanswered to start the game, and Los Angeles could not come back. Game 3 was a different story as the series shifted to LA. The Kings took it 3-1, with the Blackhawks never leading once. Game 4 would be crucial. If LA won, the series would be tied. If Chicago won, they would have a stranglehold. The Kings started off strong, getting the opening goal. Chicago tied. The Kings then took a 2-1 lead, and again Chicago tied. This time it was Kane scoring. And then in the third period, it was Hossa getting the game winner and putting the Hawks 1 win away from their second Stanley Cup final in 4 years. Game 5 would be one for the ages. Keith and Kane opened the scoring for Chicago, but Los Angeles stormed back with goals from Dwight King and Anze Kopitar to tie the game. Then, with 4 minutes left in the game, Patty Kane scored his second to give Chicago a 3-2 lead, but LA wasn't done yet. With 10 seconds left, Mike Richards had scored a tip-in to tie the game. It was stunning for the Chicago crowd, and thus ensured an overtime marathon. And I think you might know where this is going.
And the pass!
The Heartbreaker. A hat trick for Patrick Kane. It is one of the best performances ever, and an iconic, era-defining moment. But Chicago was far from out of the woods yet. Waiting for them in the finals were the 2011 champs, the Boston Bruins. Bergeron, Marchand, Chara, Rask, Jagr. Another stacked squad Chicago would have to take down. Every game in the series was a barn burner. In Game 1, Boston led 2-0 and then 3-1, but Chicago got third period goals from Dave Bolin and Johnny Oduya. Then the game went to 3 overtimes. Crawford made an incredible 51 saves, and Rask made a whopping 59 stops, but he missed the last one.
Throws the ball to the net, score!
Andrew Shaw scored the winner, and the Blackhawks took a 1-0 series lead. But as we know, Chicago hates taking the easiest road. The Bruins came from behind and won Game 2 in overtime. Game 3 was another Bruins win, and Chicago found themselves staring down another series deficit. If the Bruins won Game 4, it would nearly be impossible for the Hawks to come back. And this game would be one for the record books.
Kept along by Seabrook, right, score! The Blackhawks have won it!
With the series tied heading to Chicago, the Hawks took over Game 5. Kane had a pair including the game winner, and Boston never led in a 3-1 loss. Game 6 would give Chicago a chance to close out the series. Boston, with their back against the wall, fought harder than ever. Chris Kelly opened the scoring. Taves tied it for Chicago. And then in the third period, Milan Lucic scored a massive goal. Boston was up with just a minute and 15 seconds to go. Game 7, or at least overtime, looked inevitable. But then came 16 of the most fateful seconds in NHL history.
Keith around for a beat in front. Score! Taves to Beckel. Help to the back. O'Duya shot deflected. Scramble. They score! Ballin! 3-2 with less than a minute to go.
It just tapped off one of the best seasons ever. They were the best regular season team and had toppled 3 of the last 4 Cup winners en route to their second Stanley Cup in the 2010s. Kane won the Conn Smythe as playoff MVP, and they looked to run it back the next season. In the first round, they faced St. Louis. The Blues stunned Chicago by winning the first 2 games in overtime. The Hawks, as always, fought back. Kane scored an OT winner in Game 4, Taves scored an OT winner in Game 5, and Chicago completed the series comeback in Game 6 with 4 goals in the third period. They faced off against Minnesota in the second round. The Hawks would win in 6 games, and Patrick Kane scored another overtime series winner to send Chicago to another conference final matchup with Los Angeles. After winning the first game, Chicago would lose 3 straight, setting the Kings up with 3 chances to move on. As we know by now, Chicago loves their comebacks. Down 4-3 in the third period of Game 5, Michael Handzus would end up scoring an OT to force Game 6. Again, Chicago found themselves down in the third period. Keith scored to tie, and then Patrick Kane scored a wonder goal to force Game 7 in Chicago. And wow, what a game it was. 2-0 Chicago, the Kings tied. 3-2 Chicago, the Kings tied again. 4-3 Chicago, the Kings tied again. And so, off to overtime we went. LA had never led. Chicago had far more shots and chances. The crowd felt like the Hawks were going to pull it out. Winning in the clutch was just what these Blackhawks did after all. And in overtime, all the Kings could muster was an outside shot from the point.
It's in! The Kings are headed to the Stanley Cup final!
One bounce away from another Stanley Cup, as the Hawks had only watched from home when Martinez scored another big overtime goal. Still, the Hawks were clearly at the top of their game, and 2015 would give them another chance at glory. Chicago breezed through the regular season, finishing 7th place overall despite Patrick Kane missing over 20 games. In the first round, they matched up against the higher seed Nashville Predators. In Game 1, Nashville went up 3-0, but in typical Blackhawks fashion, they pulled off the comeback, winning in overtime thanks to Duncan Keith. Chicago had another come-from-behind win in Game 4, this time with Seabrook ending it. They went on to win the series in Game 6, coming back from a 3-1 deficit with Keith scoring another winner. They swept the Minnesota Wild in the second round with Kane scoring 5 goals and 6 points in the series. In the semifinals, they faced off against the Western Conference's best team, the Anaheim Ducks, and it was war. The Ducks won Game 1 handedly. In Game 2, the Hawks led 2-0, but Anaheim came back. Perry scored an equalizer in the third, and we were headed to overtime. Actually, 3 overtimes. Marcus Kruger eventually broke through and tied the series for Chicago. Anaheim won in Game 3, and again, Chicago had to fight hard to try and tie the series. It was 1-1 after 2 periods, before a crazy 6-goal third period. Taves and Seabrook scored, 3-1 Blackhawks. Anaheim struck back with 3 unanswered goals to take the lead. Then Kane scored another signature clutch goal in the third to tie. And just like Game 2, we were headed for multiple overtimes. Anton Vermette was the hero this time, and just like that, the series had become a best of 3. In Game 5, the Ducks led 4-2 with just 2 minutes left, and remarkably, Jonathan Taves scored twice to force overtime. But it was Anaheim who got the last laugh, as Matt Bolesky scored just 45 seconds into overtime. Chicago could not afford to lose another game. And they didn't just do that, they never let Anaheim get another lead. They won 5-2 in Game 6 and 5-3 in a deciding 7th game. Over these 2 games, Kane and Keith both had 5 points, and Chicago was going back to the final. In the championship, they faced off against a very young Lightning team with the likes of Hedman, Stamkos, and Kucherov. Every game was a nail-biter. The Lightning led 1-0 for most of Game 1, but Teravainen and Vermette scored back-to-back in the third, and Chicago walked away with the victory. The Lightning fought back, winning Games 2 and 3 with a third-period winner in each. There was another third-period winner in Game 4, as Brandon Saad scored to tie the series. Game 5 would be pivotal, and both teams knew it. Sharp opened the scoring for Chicago. Filppula tied it for Tampa Bay in the second, and then Vermette won it with a fifth straight third-period winner. This series was crazy. And so we had Game 6, giving Chicago a chance to lift the cup on home ice, something they hadn't done in either of their previous cup runs. And it was electric.
Laying one across, and it's Keith the shot, save, rebound, he scores! Moving back up with Kane, drops it to Richards, across the Kane, he scores! For the third time in 6 years, the Blackhawks are Stanley Cup champions.
Keith took home the Conn Smythe, and Chicago had just won their third cup in 6 years. They are still the only team to have done that in the salary cap era. And they didn't just do it through sheer dominance either. Every series felt hard-fought, and they won by numerous clutch victories. In their 3 cup runs, they beat the best teams the league had to offer. Marchand and Bergeron's Bruins, Kopitar, Doughty, Quick and the Kings, Datsuk and Zetterberg's Red Wings, the Sedins and Luongo's Canucks, Thornton, Marleau and the Sharks, Perry, Getzlaf and the Ducks, and in their final series win as a core, they beat Hedman, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Stamkos, and the next great team in the NHL. They didn't just win, they won against the best, and they did so over and over again. If you made it to the end, I can't thank you enough. You're absolutely the best. You don't understand how much work went into that video, so thank you sincerely for watching, and stay tuned for a lot more hockey content coming all summer.